in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone. This is Kara Ostrom with the NAPCP, and I will be your host for today's virtual demonstration presented by Global Edge. I would like to remind the attendees that this demonstration is approximately 45 minutes long, with time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. If you do have a question, please type into the online question box within the GoToWebinar dashboard as we go. Today's demonstration is being presented by Jay Cherry, President of Global Edge. Jay, thank you for your time today, and I will now turn the demonstration over to you at this time. So everyone enjoy. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Kara. I really do appreciate it. And also thank you to the NAPCP for facilitating the webinar today and helping us get this off the ground. We do really appreciate that. With me today also at Global Edge, I have a couple of folks that will be available at the end to answer questions. They're also panelists, which is Mike Christensen. He is the product manager for Encompas. And I also have Cheryl Patton, who is our director of operations. I also want to thank all the participants. It's exciting. I've been logged in for 10 minutes, and I'm watching the attendee list grow. So we're up to 88 now. It's exciting for our company. I really do appreciate the opportunity to share the information that we're going to share through this webinar. In terms of, if I can get my screen to change here, presenters, and my screen is not wanting to move. This is awkward. As I work on that, I will tell you, my name is Jay Cherry. I am the president and co-founder of Global Edge. I'm not sure what that glitch was about. My apologies. Essentially, I have spent 25 years really in the credit and financial space. Over the course of my career, I've worked predominantly for banking institutions, financial institutions. You can kind of see the career timeline here relative to the banks, working for GE Capital, Bank of America, Sears Credit. I'm also a member of the American Bankers Association, a graduate of their bank card management school. And really, what I like to kind of encapsulate about my career is I've spent 25 years dealing with risk, looking at and trying to isolate the 1 to 2 to 3% within any credit portfolio that really needs unique or special attention. And that's really, I think, positioned me in particular, but also Global Edge well in the market to understand when we're looking at and assisting clients with respect to purchase or procurement cards, the kind of things that need to be paid attention to, not just on the risk side, but also on the potential revenue side, which we'll talk about momentarily. In terms of Global Edge, just briefly, I want to tell you about our parent company, which is JH Capital Group. JH Capital is based out of Calabasas, California. We've been in business for over 25 years. It's a multi-million-dollar organization. More than 20 companies under the JH Capital umbrella with a presence in more than 15 states. We have a presence, multiple verticals within consumer, government, and commercial space. In terms of Global Edge as an organization, we were founded in 2004 really as an accounts payable recovery audit company. So our background is very rich in the audit space, but also working with clients from a vendor master file standpoint, from a supplier onboarding perspective. We have a number of different tools that help you not just look at risk across your enterprise, but also helps you optimize your revenue streams. We are a Native American-owned company. We have our technology is award-winning. We have 2 national awards for the product that you're going to see today. Our product is industry agnostic. Most of our products, in fact, are industry agnostic, but it's also card agnostic. So as we talk about Encompas today, it doesn't matter if your portfolio is a Visa, a MasterCard, American Express, a fleet card. Our technology can accommodate all of those cards, but also in a single instance. You don't have to subscribe multiple times. We can put multiple types of cards within our platform. Our technology is also web-based. Software as a service. It's a subscription model. There's no servers to buy, no upfront capital. It has to be deployed. But we'll talk more about that once we get deeper into the webinar. So the goal today really is to look at 4 different areas. One of the first things I want to do is talk about some common beliefs. Really myths in the industry that surround the or create fears around the growth or usage of purchase and procurement cards. I want to talk about 3 of those beliefs and tell you really Global Edge's position on that and why we think that those myths are really misplaced. I want to talk about your vendor master file and how Global Edge can analyze your vendor master file and help you figure out how to monetize your payment stream and bring money back to your bottom line. We also want to talk about the ROI tools that are necessary. You know, one of the things we hear is, well, it's a very compelling story and it's very interesting, but I don't know how to approach my CFO with this. Well, you know, we've got tools to help you do that. We've got models that we'll share with you today, but also that we can help you and your organization with. But in the end, you really can't grow your portfolio if you don't have the appropriate controls. And that's what Encompas was built to do, is to be customized to your organization in such a way that you can grow a portfolio with confidence and know that you don't have added risk or exposure, and that you're comfortable that things are being audited based on your rules, and every transaction, every cardholder, and every month is being reviewed. So we'll talk about that as we get into more into the presentation. In terms of myths, so one of the things we hear the most is, if I grow my procurement card portfolio, I have to be concerned about added fraud, waste, and abuse. And I'll tell you that without controls, I would say that's a possibility. But really, because we were formed as an accounts payable recovery company, you know, we look at when you pay with a check, you're actually more exposed than when you pay with a purchase or procurement card. And I say that because typically an organization, at least this is our experience, will actually look at their payment file, and they'll do a recovery audit, and they'll actually go back and look at the transactions about once every 3 to 5 years. And in doing so, our experience also suggests that once you do that audit, we're going to recover 0.3 to 0.5 of 1 point from duplicate payments, or the payment was paid inappropriately, a duplicate, for example. And the thing is, when you have a procurement card platform, we're actually able to provide those controls and look at a transaction level detail on a monthly basis. It doesn't have to be, you know, our platform is set up where you actually can look at those transactions as frequently within 24 or 48 hours of when they occurred. And, you know, we have one example here of a client that we have that has roughly $80 million that's on a procurement card. And in 2012, they estimate, based on their audit, that they had about $14,000 in misuse. And as you use the numbers that I mentioned from a recovery audit standpoint, if you didn't audit those $14,000, or actually if you didn't audit that $80 million in transactions for 3 to 5 years, that actually would be represented about $120,000. So you can see, putting things on a procurement card and looking at them on a monthly basis really actually prevents the exposure that you've got. It doesn't increase it. So myth number 2, excessive manual controls. My response initially is going to be somewhat the same. That could be the case if you don't have the appropriate systemic controls that are in place based on your organization's usage requirements. What I mean by that is, if you don't have a rules-based engine that can actually go and look at each transaction, you would have to audit transactions on a manual basis. And what we typically find is that anywhere from 3 to 5% of transactions might be audited, or it's a random sampling of, say, 100. And if that's the case, you know, to cover your portfolio, if you chose to grow it, it would, in fact, take additional resources. But when you have a platform that allows you at the department level to take some almost 40 independent rules, customize those rules to your usage requirements, run those against all your transactions, you actually minimize the amount of resources necessary. In this particular case, not only can we run the transactions against your rules, we actually give you the ability to create a custom scorecard that will prioritize the work so that you may have rules that are somewhat trivial to your organization if it's, let's say, T&E. And when you prioritize it based on the scorecard, you can deploy your resources against those rules that are most important, minimizing the amount of resources you actually require at all to do the audit. And we're going to look at some of those controls as we get further into the webinar. Lastly, limited visibility to spend. The thing I would tell you here is the great thing about looking at transaction level detail, also by department and by individual cardholder, is we've created a suite of BI tools that gives you complete transparency into every transaction, whether it's at the department level, whether it's at a merchant level, whether it's at merchant keywords. We actually give you complete visibility into all the transactions that you've got, as well as the ability to extract the data and do your own analysis around it. The flip side of that is, without using a procurement card, if you want that same visibility, again, because we're an audit company, you have to download a PO table, an invoice line item detail table, perhaps, a vendor master file table. It's much more cumbersome and much more resource intensive. And generally it includes your IT folks, which, as we all know, can be a challenge in organizations. So growing your P card actually gives you greater visibility, and we'll look at some of the types of metrics that you can look at through our Encompas product later in the webinar. So the question becomes, as you dismiss these myths one at a time and you recognize the fact that you can grow your platform, the question becomes, how do you do that? As you look across your vendor master file, it becomes, you really need to make choices in terms of how you treat your vendor master file in general. And one of the things that Global Edge does as a complementary service is we will help an organization. We do what's called a revenue assessment, where we actually take your vendor master file and we will do an analysis on that vendor master file. And we're looking for three things. We're looking to help you understand the risk that's within your vendor master file. You don't want to be paying the wrong people, whether it's with a check or a procurement card. So one of the things that we do through our risk assessment, or revenue assessment, excuse me, is we go to the IRS and we're going to match your vendors to make sure that you don't have duplicates, or it's just a bad tax ID, or it matches that of a different company. It's one of our basic services. And we're also going to look from a recovery perspective at things such as duplicate vendor name, duplicate address, bad addresses, and look and see where you may have duplicate overpayments from a looking backwards perspective. But then we're going to do another analysis that really says, look, based on our profiles, based on the things that we've looked at in the past, high spend transactions, low risk vendors, what is the optimal amount of your spend that you could perhaps move over to a purchase or procurement card? And the value in doing that becomes pretty obvious. If you can shift from a check that's costly to the benefit of a rebate through your banking relationship or a discount, reduce your check cost, increase your spend visibility, and get 100% audit coverage, it just simply makes sense. And we're going to go through a scenario here in just a moment. I'm actually going to show this to you, but the numbers can be pretty profound, quite frankly. And we'll look at a case study here in just a moment. So as you look to grow your P-card platform, there are really three components that you want to pay attention to. One is reducing your check cost. For every payment that you can move over, our experience suggests it's about $14.50. Now, an organization can argue that it's a little more or a little less. We hear anywhere from it costs me $4 to $50, quite frankly, but we tend to settle on about $14.50 per check that's produced. So for every check you eliminate, you're eliminating the check stock cost, the printer cost, the mail cost, the envelope. All that begins to add up. And for every payment that you can shift, you begin to experience rebates and discounts from your banking relationship. Typically, on the low end, you'd see about 0.5 point. On the very high end, depending on the transactions, it could be as much as 2%. That's probably not common and probably not something you should expect, but it's somewhere in between that range. And lastly, from a cash management perspective, you have to give consideration to the cost of funds, the float, the dollars that are sitting in the bank, and just the money necessary to make those payments. And when you factor those things in to your payment stream, you've isolated the right group of people, you provided the right kind of controls, that's when really you start to monetize your vendor master file. That's when you start driving revenue back to your bottom line. So we'll look quickly at a sample or a case study. So let's say, for example, in your organization, you have $500 million in spend, and you choose to move in year one 5% of that spend to a procurement card, and your annual check cost, your annual checks are 45,000 checks. You have $14.50, which we recognize as kind of a norm, 1.5% rebate in year one, 5% cost to capital, and 5 cents cost per card transaction. When you look at that and you put that into an operating model, you start to see in year one, you're really looking at about a $1.1 million savings. And the components of that are the 5% that you moved over, $25 million, a rebate of 1.5%, the 45,000 checks drops by 5%, you recognize the cost, and then your cost of funds really is the rate that you would pay to have access to that money. And when you look at that over a 3-year period, you're looking at about a $4.8 million savings or return back to the bottom line of your organization. And that's pretty profound. You can use these same variables, and you know internally what what the makeup of your portfolio is or your spend. And Global Edge, once again, as we go through a process, if you were to partner with us and we had conversation, we would ask for your vendor master file, help you make the decisions in terms of what to transition over. You know, is it 3%, 5%, or 20%? Use these same variables to help you understand what the opportunity is. And it really equips you to go and make the business case to your executive leadership. So from there, let's talk about controls, because it's one thing to isolate the opportunity. It's another thing to justify the opportunity. But then really you've got to be able to demonstrate the controls that we talked about back in the myth that we discussed. What Global Edge has done is we have built a product called Encompas. It is I mentioned this briefly in the beginning, but it's a software as a service model. It's a subscription-based application that there's no hardware to buy. Embedded within Encompas, it has a very dynamic workflow engine, which I'm going to talk about in more detail, but it allows you to set up automated triggers and really manage your work from a systemic perspective. It allows you to customize the rules that sit on top of your purchase or T&E program. It gives you dashboards, and most importantly, it gives you that 100% audit coverage, looking at every cardholder, every transaction, every month. So as we talk about that, let's look at some of the rules. So we have really broken down into 4 categories. We have scorecard rules, which looks at high-risk MCCs. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. High credit limit, split transactions, duplicate transactions, single transaction limits, transaction volume, the percent of credit limit, even transaction, merchant keywords, and cash advances. Now, not all of these rules would apply to every organization. I'll give you an example. Under cardholder activity, for example, employee status, which I may touch on in a moment, spend limit, policy exceptions. But when you get into 30, 60, and 90 days, these rules are in there. For example, in my last organization, when I used a procurement card, I got reimbursed in my check, and it was my responsibility to pay that credit card at the end of the cycle period. So I was responsible for ensuring that that account didn't age. Not every organization operates that way. A lot of organizations actually pay the bill themselves and then reconcile at the end of the period. But we've got those rules in there nonetheless. One of the other things that we find interesting is employee status. The employee status gives us the ability, or you the ability, to actually create a set of rules around where that employee stands within the organization. Let's say it's a new employee, and you want to put them into an audit bucket. It's an employee that's subject to retirement or is on disciplinary action. You actually can group those into a common bucket and apply a unique set of rules in order to monitor those to look for unique instances of usage. We also get very deep on fuel purchases, looking at the usage per month, per transaction, per vehicle. There's a lot of different ways that we cut and slice the fuel purchase. Also, transaction and merchant keywords, reoccurring transactions, local transactions. For example, you have a maintenance worker or a maintenance department that really functions within a geographical area. You can put in a zip code that allows you to look at those transactions within a certain area. Anything outside of that becomes an audit exception. Time of day and weekends, holidays. We look at, you can set rules around all of those various things. And ultimately, if you have a travel and entertainment portfolio or card platform, you can set all the rules associated with the usage of that with respect to airfare, rental cars, multi-state transactions, etc. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of embedding your actual rules and what the things that you want to pay attention to within the tool. So what we're looking at here is a screenshot, and I'll tell you I'm going to go through probably 6 or 8 screenshots, and I'll talk about what they represent. I may or may not, depending on time, actually go into the application, but at the end of the day, I at least want you to get a sense of what the application looks like and its ease of use. This particular screen is looking at the audit rules, and essentially you have the ability to turn a rule on or turn the rule off. Once you turn the rule on, you're able to put in the thresholds or the control limits that are necessary for your organization. The other thing you can do when you set, you can define audit profiles. This is where you start to create these rules specific to a group of users within your organization. You could have a set of rules for all the folks in the upper Midwest or in the southeastern region. You could have rules for your sales folks versus your operational folks. And you simply name it, give it a description, and set the rules. The other thing I would point out here is if you have multiple card types, they can be within the same instance. And what I mean by that is you may have a user, for example, that has a corporate card, and they also have a travel and entertainment card. I'm not saying that that's that common, but if you did, you're able to look at that and set different rules based on the card types. My natural instinct is to pause and ask if there's questions, but I know I can't do that. So I hope you're saving those for the end. Next is once you set those rules, you're able to actually create a scorecard. And the scorecard, you can pick the statement month and year. You can pick the card type. And then you simply say, what do I want in the scorecard? It's based on the parameters that you would set when you set up your audit profiles. You can add to your scorecard or remove things from the scorecard. And what's important to note here is once you run those rules, it will force rank from highest risk to lowest risk the folks that have exceptions relative to that set of rules. Now within that and from the screen, you will see the score itself to the right. You'll see the grand total and the weighted total, because you can actually go within each of these rules and you can weight those based on importance. You also can go within the exception and click on the exception itself. What was the transaction that drove that exception to high credit limit, and look at that from this location. You also can go in and you can add them to continuous monitoring. So if you see someone who comes up on a reoccurring basis, you actually can just simply click this button here. And there's a unique queuing structure within our application, and that individual will fall within that queue, and you have the ability to isolate them from a normal population of however you've set up your audit rules and your audit groups. So now we're looking at once you have something that has been scored and it's been the exception drives it to what we call a workflow queue. And every audit instance or audit exception has a home or a queue, if you will. And you have the opportunity, user, to go in and say, what rules are most risky to my organization? You prioritize those. And as you do so, the cardholder actually falls within a queue, and it's prioritized relative to how you want to approach that work from a risk standpoint. And ultimately, you can assign users within your organization to audit specific types or audit everything. So, for example, you would have an auditor that may own every audit exception that's in the organization, or you could assign them simply to a certain set of audit rules. You may want to audit, 20 rules just for the sake of having the data and the analytics and to look for trends and patterns. But you may only want to audit actually 10 rules, and those 10 rules go to someone to look at. Let's say you have and there's no limit on users that can be in the system. You may have, for example, someone in HR that you set a set of rules based on employee status or a pending termination, and then they have an exception. Maybe you have someone in HR that looks at that to see if it's of risk to your organization or not. This gives you the ability to do that. Just to orient you a little bit to this sheet, or excuse me, to this page within the application, you have visibility to all the transactions. So I am in a cardholder, and within that cardholder I can see all that cardholder's transactions, the cardholder details themselves. I can view multiple exceptions. If they happen to have other cards, a travel card and a procurement card, I can see both of those here. I can look at any document that has been uploaded. Let's say it's a travel request. It could be associated to this cardholder and to this transaction. And then the comments, what it does is an auditor works through the work which occurs in the space here. They select an action and a status. They can send automatic notifications, or they can select from a library of notifications. I'll talk on that in a few minutes. They can assign a next work date, and they actually add a comment. And every one of these comments are date and time stamped, the outcome of the event, and it gets recorded in a continuous record of comments, so you know everything that's occurred within this record and within this exception. That is our workflow engine. You also, from here, can put someone on continuous monitoring. You can get very deep into looking at all the exceptions that have happened over time as well. You also can look at merchant details from here by clicking simply on this link that's related to a specific exception. This is a screenshot of our email notification template. What a user has the ability to do is create a library of notifications. It may be that you have an audit exception. It may be I need additional documents. But the way the platform is set is you create that library, and that library can be associated to a queue. And this is where triggers and controls kick in. So if you want to audit a set of transactions, you literally can do that without having an auditor get involved, because you can say, look, if there's an audit, I need a document, and you can set time parameters. If the event has not worked within a certain time frame, it can trigger an email. And there's other things that this can do simply by setting this, by creating this library and building it and associating it to your queue structure. I know that can get kind of complicated. It's not. Once you see the technology and once you understand how these parts connect together, it actually is a very efficient way to audit all of your transactions. It gives you tremendous control over your ability to get through the exceptions without having to deploy a lot of staff to do that. This here is continuous monitoring. So you can see, regardless of what queue the person should fall in, I have a list of folks, their employee ID, their department, location, etc. And I can tell whether they're active or not. If they passed from a workflow status, I can see the score, the number of audit findings is listed here. But this gives you the ability to pull all those folks up and essentially create a watch list of things that you want to pay attention to and things that you deem as higher risk across your organization. And then we get into the BI. So when you think about business intelligence, you really want insight, actionable information. You want information that allows you to make better decisions relative to usage and to minimize your risk. There's a host of reporting within the platform. Mike and his team are continuously enhancing our reporting capabilities in Encompas. We're always open to new ideas, but it's a dynamic set of BI tools that when you click on it, actually highlights, shows you underlying metrics within each of these bars. You can look at it by department. The types of things you can look at is is progress within the audit. On audit summary, you can look at it by card type, department. You can look at aging, audit statistics around the audit activity itself, total risk within the portfolio, total spend, account statement detail. There's an audit log, cardholder profile, exception and comments, and transaction detail. Those are just some of the things that can be looked at. I am going to go back to the landing page because there's some things I want to tell you about here as well. In the event you do, if you are a subscriber or a user of Encompas, from the landing page, there's actually a lot of information here. You can search for a cardholder. If you have an auditor, they can access their queue just by logging in and clicking this link because their login ID is associated to the work that they're responsible for. They don't have to go and search out what do I have to audit today. They could simply log in today based on the next work date of the queue and the ownership that they have. They click on Access My Queue, and it takes them directly to their work. You can view reports and dashboards from here. Some of the other things that we really didn't touch on, and I'm just going to talk about a few of the menus across the top. You do have, obviously, search capability with multiple filters. On the audit stand, from an audit perspective, you're able to, we talked about setting the audit rules and building profiles. You're also able to go into MCC templates. And one thing I should say, because I'm sure this is going to come up and be a question, is Encompas is intended to be, it's not a proactive stop at point of sale tool. We built it that way on purpose. One, the hardware and the relationships that we would have to do that would get costly, and our objective with Encompas is to make it an affordable audit tool. So we didn't go that route. But what we have done is we've allowed you to go in and say, I can go to my bank and I can stop a transaction from occurring. You can do that. They can flag MCC codes, but what we've found from users is they don't really want to embarrass their cardholder, so they tend to want to open it up. You can do that with Encompas, but you also can come after the fact and set what would be desired blocked MCC codes by multiple categories. So, your employee doesn't have to get embarrassed. They're able to use their card freely, but you immediately know what exception occurred relative to how you want them to act and behave with that card. That's the model that we have adopted, and most of our clients, they like that. In terms of reports, we spoke about that. Not only does it have dashboards, it's got transaction level detail. You can download, you can print. We talked about the workflow tool. There's also, from an administrative standpoint, where it gives you the ability to define roles, responsibilities, to define where people can go within the application, what they can access, what they can't access, what they can print, download, etc. It has a lot of controls just around the usage itself. And ultimately, from a support standpoint, it's got a lot of documentation around the usage of the tool. But we also, one of the things about Global Edge is we associate a relationship manager to every relationship. So if there's questions, you always have access to a resource to answer those questions. Kara, I am ahead of schedule. Without anticipating questions throughout this, I actually got through this much quicker than I thought. So I am comfortable. If you want to open up questions, we can go ahead and do that.
Very good, Jay. Thank you. And I assume you can hear me?
I can, yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of start taking a look at some that have come in. One question. Can I customize the risk level based on our organization's policies?
You can. I would need a little bit more insight into the question, but you absolutely can customize the risk levels. I will go back to a screenshot that will show you here, where you can classify based on the rule as being a low risk, medium risk, or high risk. And it ultimately will drive the score. I hope I'm answering the question. But by turning the rule on and setting the tolerances, for example, let's use transaction volume. So I can say if I have a cardholder that transacts and I see more than 20 transactions in a month, that's concerning to me. That's a high-risk transaction. Anything from 5 to 5 to 20 is okay. Obviously, 0 to 5 is low risk, and I'm not overly concerned about that. Every one of our rules has the ability to set those thresholds relative to low, medium, and high risk. You can do it also by department, by user group. You can have a set of rules for executives versus directors versus supervisors versus end users. So it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility.
Here's a goodie, and this certainly pertains to everyone where everyone's working hard with a lot to do in a short amount of time. Jay, can you talk about how much time and resources will take on my end?
Well, I would like to know, it's a great question. I don't know what position I'm talking about, so that question could come from an auditor or from a CFO. So I don't know the root of who asked the question, but I will tell you, Global Edge comes out of the box, so to speak, with a set of rules that's defined. One of the things that we're going to do is when we process your data the first time, we like to say that we will help you calibrate your rules if you want us to do that. So you can give us data. We will analyze it against a set of baseline audit rules so that we can help you. We can have a more enriched conversation relative to what your rules should look like. At that point, the way we have architected the platform is we need 3 files from you. We need a transaction file, a cardholder file, and an employee file. And in most instances, we set that up. You upload those files once a month. We don't have to have connectivity on a reoccurring basis. We have a flat layout that we need. You push the file to us. We run the rules. It automatically queues within the queue structure that you've created, and your auditor works the things based on the importance that you've assigned. So we believe that it's going to take you less time than what you're doing today because it's been architected in such a way or designed in such a way to do precisely that, to take time away from the audit experience, not make it longer.
Okay, next question. Can you have multiple approvals? Is this a web-based program?
Could I get you to repeat that question? I'm sorry, Kara, you broke up just a little bit.
No problem, happy to. Question is, can you have multiple approvals? Is this a web-based program?
It is a web-based program with respect to approvals. I have to think about that. That's a good question. I don't know that I've ever been asked that. You do have the ability to escalate within the queuing structure. So as I think through this, I believe that you could set a status code that, if true, would escalate to another individual dynamically. I might ask for Mike or Cheryl to help me with that, but I believe that our queuing rules would, in fact, allow you to enter a status, which we talked about in the workflow engine here, an action or a status, which could automatically push that and reassign it to another individual. And these users, if I were to pull this menu down, would have a list of users. That would be one way to do it. Without understanding the question a little deeper, that's my initial thoughts on that. Mike or Cheryl, if you have any comments to that question, please feel free to add to it. Okay.
Okay, great. Next question. Jay, can you go over your point about the cardholder not being declined, but rather flagged as an exception?
Sure. So, again, I'll back up just a little bit and repeat a little what I said. So our objective, I travel a lot, and the last thing that I want is to walk up to a counter and swipe my card. As a traveler, you run into all kinds of situations that are unexpected. Sometimes they're not so good, and you end up in circumstances you can't get out of. So I don't, as a very frequent traveler, want to walk up and swipe my card and be told no. So we're not designed to stop point of sale. But what you can do, for example, if you said Jay can only travel on Delta Airlines, I can put an MCC code based on my airlines that says Jay has to use Delta. And I'm not promoting Delta, by the way, but I could say that's my carrier of choice for a host of different reasons. So if I see a United transaction or a US Air, it would flag that. This is a very basic example, but it would flag that because I can pick the MCC code associated with that carrier, and it would flag it as an audit exception, and it would put it into an audit bucket based on the fact that I use the card where the organization chose for me not to use the card. That doesn't mean I didn't get my ticket, and it doesn't mean I didn't get to my destination. It just means that the organization is going to know I did it in a way that's not consistent with their travel policy. And that's really, in the simplest sense, what I was trying to convey earlier.
Well, Jay, I'm glad that you kind of did kind of fall short with your presentation because we've got many questions to get to, so this is great.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. So what size should a P-card program be to be worthy of having your audit tool versus manual audit?
That's a great question. I would say that I think the minimum that we have, and I might need Mike on this, is probably around 100 cards. That doesn't mean we couldn't do fewer cards. But I would tell you that smaller in this case is not necessarily a bad thing, because if you can put the right controls and set the right tone relative to usage before you begin growing your P-card portfolio, that's important, because now you have communicated to the organization that you've got controls, so behave, basically, and do the things that are responsible and in keeping with the organization's policies. And when you do that, you don't have the issues, the downstream issues, where you wait till you're 15,000 cards and suddenly you got things that are a bit out of control. You managed it from the start. So it's not bad to start early. In fact, I'd say it's probably advantageous, but there's obviously no matter adequate controls to protect the organization. So I hope that helps.
And you know, Jay, this question, it might echo what you just talked about, but let me just read it for you.
Sure.
Will this software be ideal for a large population of cardholders and spend with dynamically different rules, risk factors across the board?
You know, I'm going to say that it would be based on the way you can craft. I wish there would be a follow-up to that. I'd like to understand it a little bit deeper. But I think what they're saying is I have different user groups, and I have different people that I'd like to, that have different risks to me, and I would like to audit in different ways. I hope that's the spirit of the question. If it is, this absolutely accommodates that by giving you the ability to set different audit profiles, and also doing it based on the risk tolerances within those profiles. If that doesn't answer it, please just ask the one who asked the question to reframe it, and I'll try to be a little bit more specific. But the way you can craft your audit rules is incredibly dynamic and flexible, be it from an MCC perspective, from an audit rule, from a tolerance standpoint, and from a threshold. It's very flexible to go across multiple risk dimensions or in the organization.
Very good. And I'll keep an eye on the person who did ask that to see if they come through with a follow-up. But moving right along, Jay, is this a real-time product or once a month?
That's a great question. It is. It's as frequent as you choose to push your data to us. So most users do once a month. But if you're a high transaction shop and you're concerned that you want to look at this on a 24-hour, 48-hour basis, you can push your data to us and it can be processed, because we just need the data in a structured format. Once it comes over, there's actually a table that allows you to define the frequency at which the rules are ran. And so when we get the data, we would set the table appropriately and we would run the rules, and it would be available for you following that. So if you gave it to us more frequent than once a month, you would have the results more frequent than that.
And Jay, just so you know, I'm kind of working with your colleagues who are the other panelists just to kind of see if I can't figure out hearing them come across. So just know that, but we're working on that. Okay, great.
No problem.
This is great questions, you guys. All right, so do you have preset transaction limits, or can the customer customize these?
Well, both. So as I was saying earlier, we can set So sometimes when you have a procurement card or a T&E card portfolio, you don't entirely know what you have. You don't entirely know what the behavior within that portfolio is. So what we do is we can take your existing transactions and we can run those to kind of set some tolerances. That's one thing. The other is I mentioned calibrating a scorecard, so we can use your data or we can use past client data to kind of help you set those baseline rules, so that when you do process your monthly file, you've got a sense of what's good, what's bad, etc.
And Jay, just so you know, we did get response. You did answer that particular individual's question very well, so they're happy with that response.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next question. Can you describe what type of format you need for the vendor master file? We have a rather old program, and I'm not certain how we would get the appropriate information to you for this program.
Well, the vendor master file is kind of an added process. I mean, what we do with the vendor master file is trying to assess your risk within your vendor master file, but it's also trying to help you make decisions in terms of who would go onto a purchase or procurement card based on your payment behavior with that vendor. With the vendor master file, we've worked over the years with just about every system that you can think of. If it's an older legacy system, I will tell you, let me say it differently. We've worked from Oracle all the way down to literally DOS-based systems. I prefer the Oracles of the world and the more sophisticated modern systems, just because the data formats are simpler. But we really can get a data dump of your vendor master file. We have a defined file listing of what we need. We would give that to you. It's standard. We need the name of the vendor, your vendor ID, the tax ID, the address information, the remittance information, how you pay the vendor. We've got all this in a format that we would simply shoot off to you and say, look, structure it in a format that is easier to process. If you can do that, give us the extraction. We'll do our analysis. We'll give it back to you. That's a challenge for you. We can take a data dump. We've done that in the past, but we really prefer it to be structured just because it speeds the process up. And then from there, once you've made the decisions, we would help you build the ROI story to go to your CFO or others within your organization to justify growing a portfolio.
Jay, what would be considered a high transaction shop?
High transaction shop. Well, so I'm going to answer this question a little bit more vague, because what I would say is, there's certain things, certain secrets to the sauce, right? So when we analyze a payment portfolio or your vendor master file in terms of how you pay it, we've got some templates and some things that we process your vendors through, and we're looking for certain things. Low-risk vendors, we're looking for the number of transactions, the amount of spend, and we put that into a file that we give back to you. I really, on the call, don't want to get too specific, but if that question, if the person who posed that question would like to have a one-off conversation, I would be more than happy to get deeper into what we look at and how we kind of profile those vendors.
Okay. Very good. And if we could just pause for a quick second, I'm curious, Mike, are you able now to hear me and to speak?
This is Mike. Can you hear me now?
Wonderful. I think that, yeah, that's good. Okay, great. So Jay, just so you know, Mike's now able to also speak to some of the questions.
Yeah, and for the audience, I will just tell you, Mike is the product expert. He understands it much more at a transactional level than I do. So he's the expert. If you got those technical detailed questions, please feel free to push those forward, and Mike's the guy to answer those.
Very good. Do you have any Canadian public sector users?
I don't believe we do, but I can tell you from my credit card experience, MCC codes and transaction details typically, it's consistent. So I don't know that would be an issue at all. And I would love to take a look at the file, and I could tell you if there's any nuances to it that would create a difficulty. But my credit card background tells me that would not be an issue whatsoever.
Very good. Next question. The history of the audit report is saved in our Global Edge account. And is it your property and our property, and for how long?
Ultimately, it's your property. We're a steward of that information as long as you're a client, but the data is your data, and if the relationship was suspended, there's probably certain information that we would archive that is unique to us. But I will say this, relative to the information we request, we don't request sensitive information, and then we could argue the definition of that. And I might ask Mike to help me out, but we're asking for the last 4 digits of the card, and then we marry that to a cardholder. We don't want any more sensitive information or create exposure for us any more than you want us to have it. So we really try to limit the information that we get that would be concerning to you. Mike, I don't know if you want to add to that answer or not, but our goal is to really limit everyone's risk. Actually, there's no risk because of the way we protect data, but Mike, any comment on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jay. From an Encompas standpoint, for sure, we only use and want to see that last 4. We tie all of those individual files you mentioned, the employee data, the cardholder data, and the transaction data. We tie that together based on employee IDs. We have the unique employee ID, and then we use the last 4. What happens is because we're looking at the last 4, you can have cardholders, again, with multiple cards, and then we just look at the last 4 and we tie it up with the employee IDs. So again, from a storage capacity and a data PCI compliance strategy, we just look at the last 4.
Thanks, Mike.
Next question. How many users can we have access in Encompas?
I'm going to say there's not a limit, but Mike, architecturally, are there restrictions on that?
No, there really isn't. There's an unlimited amount of users and roles and administrative functions you can set up. We haven't reached the max yet.
Does it allow for supervisors to verify, approve questionable transactions?
That would be part of the workflow. So what you would do is simply have a supervisor assigned to a set of audit rules, and that supervisor, when they log in, they would access their queue. It would have those questionable transactions within that queue. And if I were in the application in the workflow engine, one of the statuses is to approve or pass. You can see down here where it says pass. That's how we group that work and how we associate it to a manager, and how that manager would approve those questionable transactions.
How do you compare to Concur? Why is this not like Concur?
It's a good question. Mike, I'll let you take the first stab at that if you don't mind, and then I'll add to it if you're okay with that.
Certainly. From a Concur standpoint, my understanding of the systems and the differences between Concur and Encompas, we actually have a nice white paper put together that really describes it nicely, but the Concur system is more around expense management and approval, receipt tracking, a lot of those types of things, kind of as pre-approving transactions and reviewing them and looking at the approvals afterwards. What the Encompas tool is doing, again, is as we mentioned before, some of that approval process can be built in during the audit process when you're going through workflow, but essentially what Encompas is doing is we're doing 100% audit of all your transactions, all your data after they've come through, so it's post-transaction.
Yeah, one of the things about Global Edge is being an audit company, but we specialize in fraud management, and there's always in an organization, and I'm not saying it's present on this call, but there's always the opportunity for conflict of interest or collusion, and this doesn't allow for that, because we're going to look at the transaction based on the thresholds and things that are important to you, and it's going to surface one way or the other. And it's the aggregation of the data relative to your desired preferences across an organization, customized by audit group. So while you can take a receipt and you can approve it, that is important, but this is more really focused on the audit and the overall usage of your cardholders, specific to how you have chosen for them to use it based on your risk tolerances as a company. I will tell you, we have looked at some of the functionality relative to attaching receipts, having receipt approvals. We haven't had the demand for that yet. It's something that we've talked about placing on our roadmap. If there was enough demand, we probably would add that to our roadmap. It's something that we are exploring. We just haven't chose to do yet.
Thanks, guys. Would your software have to be set up with our organization's pre-existing bank software and end-user financial systems? In other words, how would your system be set up to retrieve the data?
Under the audit tab, we have there is a selection there where you pick a file, and there's 3 files that we need. So, for example, and we would ask your ERP system and human resources to push a file to us in a predefined format at your frequency, and we would grab that file and we archive it. And then from your bank, we're very familiar with all the layouts from Visa, MasterCard, American Express, etc. There's selected fields that we require. We would ask you to put it in a format and push it out to us. So one of the things we tried to avoid was complicated integrations and make it more ease of use and subscription-based. So we'll give you the layouts. You simply output the file. And we can help you do that if you needed help, because we recognize that you get a file every month from Bank of America or from Wells Fargo, wherever you use. We can tell you the elements that we need, how to structure that, and push that file to us through a secure mechanism. We aggregate it, we run our rules, and we score your risk, and we make it presentable to you. So there's no complex integrations with other systems.
Very good. And these 2 individuals, we've got a similar question, just asking about different sectors, and they're certainly respectful of your not necessarily needing to know any client specific, but they were just asking, can you comment on the number of universities that you currently work with, as well as K through 12?
You know, we talked about that question before the webinar, and I would really be happy to. We do work with across multiple sectors, from government to municipalities to healthcare to others. I would rather answer the specifics around our presence in each of the verticals in a demo or one-on-one than doing that over the call, if that's possible.
Nope, absolutely. And just so that everyone knows, we are kind of coming to the end of our hour together, and there are one more question that I can just certainly get to, but just please know, everyone on this call, thanks for your participation, and any questions that we didn't get to, or as Jay just said, anything that can be a little bit more specific, I will make sure to send everyone at the conclusion of today's webinar Jay's information, contact information, as well as Mike's and anyone else that you guys can get in touch with directly at Global Edge. So I'm happy to get that sent off to everyone. How about last question? Yeah, go ahead.
Certainly. I was just going to say, you know, screenshots don't do justice to the application and its ease of use. So if you know, we would really encourage you to sign up. I think we've put a link out there where you can sign up for a demonstration, and we can go in and point and click and get into a lot more detail and make it specific to your organization. But go ahead with that last question, Kara.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. What are the most common high-risk violations you find?
Mike is much more transactional than me, so I'm going to let him answer that question.
Sure. You know, we look at merchant keywords and a lot of different spending behaviors. We've seen quite a few transactions come through where people are purchasing from iTunes. We see transactions come through where they're making purchases at watches and jewelry stores. We actually saw some data come through where someone was using their corporate credit card to pay for the red light speeding ticket. We see an interesting variety of different things around. One of our clients, particularly I think this is common in the government realm, they have very specific single user spending limits for either a day or a period of time. So someone will have a $2,000 spending limit, and then they'll, in order to get over that, they'll use multiple cards to kind of get around that spending limit. So our software looks at some of those things as well. And really, it's surprising when we look at the data, as Jay mentioned, I think earlier in the call. Sometimes you don't really know what you're going to find until you really run through, and we can run it through against all the different rules. And even if you were thinking that something wasn't an issue in your particular facility, it turns out it can be. So we look at all kinds of different risk factors, and all kinds of interesting things crop up when you look.
Mike, is that what you described? Is that the pyramiding activity that we see often?
Yes. Yeah, there's a couple different scenarios: split transactions and pyramiding. Again, we look at a single day, single purchase, and a single day transaction limit. And a big part of what our software does is we look at trends over time. So it's not just what happened this month; it's what happened this month, and the previous month, the last 6 months, 12 months, and you can really see that behavior over time with cardholders.
And I think that's key, because it's one thing to audit a segment of your portfolio, but when you can look over a span of time, you always see trends and patterns and things that you just don't see on a coincidence basis, and that's very key to understanding where your real challenges lie. It's a very good point, Mike.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Mike, thank you for your participation. Jay, thank you for your time and your demonstration today. And thanks to everyone who attended